bar a sentence that some may deem severe or harsh. About 10 years before this, in 1996, Arizona voters had approved changes which allowed some juveniles to be charged as adults. The 2 convictions and 2 life sentences with no parole would stand. Now, just a few weeks before this, in May 2007, a different killer named Jeremy Pompenio, dubbed the Cornville Killer, received a plea deal in the first-degree murder of his 20-year-old girlfriend. He was sentenced the following March to life with parole eligibility after 25 years. But Pompenio was found unresponsive in his 2-inmate maximum security prison cell on May 31, 2011, in the Iman unit of Florence Prison. Then 25, he had been murdered by his cellmate, a then 24-year-old, Zach Eggers. In September of 2012, prosecutors filed a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. They planned to present evidence of his previous murder convictions to the jury. Trial was initially scheduled to begin in April 2017, however, it was postponed at the request of the defense as they needed more time to gather evidence. It took 7 years for the Pompenio murder trial to start, finally beginning on January 22, 2018. He took the stand in his own defense, mostly to dispel rumors that the murder was a hit ordered by the head of a white supremacist prison gang. Prosecutor Vince Goddard cross-examined him and played audio for the jury. The recording was of an inmate explaining to investigators that Zach had been ordered to kill. The state alleged that Zach ambushed Jeremy, punching him multiple times in the head before smashing it into the wall. Goddard also explained that his chest was obliterated by punches. His bones were snapped like toothpicks. Goddard stressed that this premeditated act had to have been on a gang leader's orders. Zach's attorney, Brett Huggins, argued that the cellmates had no previously documented beef. COs knew of no misunderstandings or conflicts, and Jeremy's murder was not planned. The defense asserted self-defense. Zach was found guilty of Jeremy Pompenio's murder, but on February 28, 2018, the jury deadlocked on his sentence. The prosecution sat a new jury for a retrial. However, on October 3, 2018, that jury deadlocked as well. Judge Joseph Giorgini handed down a 3rd life sentence as required by law following 2 hung juries. Zachary Eggers had narrowly escaped the death penalty. He is still housed at Arizona Prison Complex, Iman. On December 9, 2004, at Arizona Prison Complex Douglas, a 200-bed unit for low-security male inmates was dedicated in a ribbon-cutting ceremony and named Eggers Unit. It currently houses the inmate work crew, along with the inmate wildlife fire crew. Let me check the time here. Okay, we have time for one more story. Now, Tyler Hadley was not the first kid to kill his parents and have a party with their bodies still there by any means. And just like Tyler and Zach Eggers, 17-year-old Crystal Howell just wanted her dad out of the way so she could get the party started. Their relationship didn't seem like it would end in murder. But even Crystal's mother, Christina Raster, knew that her daughter was troubled. As a matter of fact, from early childhood, Crystal showed signs of being a troubled child. She was overly rambunctious, exhaustingly hyper, and perhaps even a bona fide troublemaker.
Crystal, she was a lot of fun. She could be a lot of challenges. If there was trouble to be found, she would find it. A lot of mischief.
She was the kind of person that you could easily predict at one point was going to be in serious trouble. She just had no idea she could turn a gun on her own father. There were very strange things that would happen with her when she was young. Kind of convinced most of the world that knew the Howells that Crystal had some problems.
Both parents' consent was apparently necessary for Crystal to get the treatment she needed. She entered into her teens unmedicated.
Michael's friend Austin Rhodes said Crystal's parents were deeply divided on this issue.
He was saying that Christy's way of dealing with Crystal was to medicate her, basically put a theoretical pillow over her face to keep her quiet, to keep her in line, and he just didn't agree with that. He thought it was the cheap and easy way out. He wanted a solution that didn't involve drugging, and as wonderful a thought as that was, unfortunately, I think cost him his life.
Michael didn't want her on that medicine, but he allowed it.
He really did not want her to be on it. He thought it changed her personality.
Christina and Mike divorced following what was reported to be a shocking family secret coming to light regarding the paternity of Crystal's sister. It was an emotionally grueling experience for everyone involved, according to reports. Mike had received a large inheritance and used proceeds to purchase an 8-bedroom cabin home in remote Sheepback Mountain near Maggie Valley in Columbia, North Carolina. He left behind his life in Georgia and his job as a sports writer and editor for the Columbia County News-Times. Crystal, then 14, went with Mike while the remainder of the family stayed in Augusta, Georgia. Mike really devoted his time to closely supervising Crystal and monitoring her behavior, although she remained unmedicated. Crystal had been suspended from school for making a bomb threat. She received a sociopathic tendency diagnosis while still in junior high. She began to self-harm then, too, and at the age of 15, Crystal attempted to take her own life. But her personality made her a friend magnet. Honestly, her friends didn't seem to have anything really bad to say about her. They remember that she and her dad had a pretty tight relationship and seemed to really understand and love each other. But they also noticed that she pushed boundaries, like with issues such as chronic truancy and a pretty serious case of kleptomania. It was reported that Crystal had a habit of routinely sneaking out to meet older men, all manner of attention-seeking behaviors. One friend called her the picture of teenage angst that everyone was always talking about. Although they clearly had money and Crystal didn't have to work, she repeatedly shoplifted, even when she was out shopping with her dad. In late February 2014, her scandalous and disrespectful behavior pushed Mike over the edge into verbal outrage. While shopping together at the local Ingles, Mike confronts Crystal after she comes out of the bathroom. He knows she went in there to hide items, and he quickly finds some unpaid merchandise on her. Mike has had enough, and he just doesn't understand what drives his daughter to steal things that he would easily pay for. They have a verbal altercation, and Mike tells his daughter that she's cut off from his inheritance. There will be no more free ride. Once back at their home, Crystal heads to the shower to contemplate her life. Per media coverage, Crystal considered taking her own life. However, she obviously decided that wouldn't be satisfying enough for her. The following day, February 24th, 2014, 17-year-old Crystal Howell crept upon her sleeping father and shot him one time in the head as he napped on the couch. Within no time, she had packed a bag and fled the property to stay with her friend, whom she told that Mike was out of town. After spending a few nights there, Crystal feigned an alarming phone call from her mom in Georgia, where her dad has supposedly gone on a business trip. Crystal told her friends that, while out of town, Mike had committed suicide. There was a family history of suicide on her dad's side of the family. Even she had a documented attempt. And then it was decided that the three girls would all go back to Sheepback Mountain together. She wasn't grieving in a normal way per se, but friends said that she was clearly affected and acting differently than usual. None of this keeps her from being a teenager, and with her dad's credit card in her possession, she gets the party started. Her girlfriend said that, although reports called the cabin a party house, there was really just one party. One big, long party, complete with a shiny new stripper pole installed in her father's kitchen. Alcohol, crystal meth, nothing was off limits according to her friends who were there. After needing 2 weeks to recover following the partying, Crystal packed up, withdrew a few grand from her dad's bank account, and took off home to her mom, Christina, in Augusta, Georgia. She was driving his bright orange Land Rover, pulling a U-Haul filled with her belongings. She told her friends that they could continue living at the house until she returned, asking them to help her out by packing up some of Michael's belongings and getting rid of them. This included a pinball machine, which was moved out the next day. When they were unable to find it a new home after all, they brought it back. Against Crystal's wishes, they decided to store it in the backyard shed instead of hauling it all the way back to where it had been. Now, when Crystal fled, she had also requested that no one enter the backyard shed, as it held memories of special times spent hanging out with her father there. Initially, everyone agreed. However, they still had a key. When they opened the shed, they knew something was frighteningly amiss. They knew mostly from the stench. Then they knew from the body, the head of which bore a ghastly wound. From the head down, the body was in a sleeping bag, then dumped sitting upright in a large plastic tote. At first, friends thought that someone had overdosed at the party, but soon realized that wasn't the case. Police quickly confirmed that the body was indeed 50-year-old Michael Howell, an individual whom had not even been reported missing. Christina, Crystal's mom, reported that she had gotten a call from her daughter who said that Michael had released her from his care. Confused, Christina told Crystal that in order for her to come back, she would need to see a letter of emancipation from the court. But still, just a few days later, Crystal arrived back in Augusta and saw her mother and sister briefly before heading to the Motel 6 on Boy Scout Road. As it turned out, no one had reported Michael missing because not only did Crystal have control of his bank account, she had commandeered his cell phone too. She had been returning texts as if she were her murdered father. Police had pinged Michael's phone, found her at the motel, and taken her into custody on March 23, 2014, about a month after the killing. Crystal would be extradited back to North Carolina. Prosecutors described her crime as a planned and brutal execution. District Attorney Ashley Welch highlighted the fact that she immediately took steps to cover up her crime. On October 10, 2016, a now 20-year-old Crystal Howell pled guilty to first-degree murder and concealment of a death / not reporting an unnatural death. She was sentenced to 5 to 7 years for the concealment charge and received a minimum sentence of 25 years on the charge of first-degree murder. Society could very well see her on the streets again, perhaps just before her 50th birthday. Crystal's Aunt Brenda shared her personal feelings about the situation, calling it a heartbreaking tragedy overall. She wanted people to know that Crystal wasn't a heinous monster, but a sweet, loving child, that there had been so many issues that had been compounded by all she'd been through the years. Crystal had a difficult childhood as well as a history of documented emotional problems, and people need to understand mental illness is serious, and it can be pushed to the limit, and I think this is what has happened. One of the guys who was helping move the pinball machine that fateful day was left deeply disturbed. Anthony was only an acquaintance who had done some work to Mike's Land Rover in the past. Unfortunately for him, he was the one who entered the shed, and he was the one who pulled back the tarp to expose the gruesome truth inside that tote. Anthony said in an interview that he was shaken, and that he never wanted to see anything like that again in his life, and that it had ruined him. Thank you so much for joining me. Next, a heart-wrenching tale of an abused child who ultimately took her anger out on her mother and stepfather. This story will show what can happen when a child feels unprotected. But until then, lovelies, don't be scared.